Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is a privilege to address such a distinguished crowd of policymakers, business leaders, and diplomats in Sofia today. The working language of today's conference is English, but there are devices for translation here on this table if someone needs translation. Today, it's snowy, and hence electricity consumption is up. And increasing also the disinformation narratives and the propaganda about how energy security is threatened in the Black Sea region. These propaganda messages aim to preserve the coal power generation in the region, diverting attention from the pressing need to accelerate the decarbonization of the energy sector and to remove market-distorting subsidies, which, by the way, are the only reason coal power plants are still working, especially in Bulgaria. Today's conference will focus on the solutions to this volatility of electricity prices and the potential risks to the security supply. Wind energy is one of these solutions. It's not the only one. There needs to be a number of key energy reforms and the unlocking of the potential of different technologies to achieve climate neutrality in the energy sector by 2050. So it's a very complex situation, but wind energy plays probably one of the main, it will be one of the main drivers of this change. And it's also an opportunity for transformative change in the way economic development is structured in the Black Sea region. Wind farms not only provide reliable complement to the rapidly growing number of PV plants in the country and across the region, but also play a crucial role in balancing the electricity grid while storage capacity is not still developed. So wind power is cheaper than the average wholesale electricity prices in the Black Sea region. And by expanding wind energy, we're going to see power prices go down. This is key if we want to preserve the industrial competitiveness of the Black Sea regional economy. To zoom in on Bulgaria just for a second, onshore wind CSD projects has potential for 10 gigawatts of power plants by 2035. Proposals for projects covering at least half of this potential are already in play. They are mature projects, but their realization has been blocked by well-coordinated disinformation campaigns and the growing Russian influence in certain parts of the country. So wind energy is also a national security issue. Offshore wind in the Black Sea, on the other hand, will shift the economic development of the maritime communities to another level. We are talking about projected capacity for installment of at least 15 gigawatts of offshore wind parks in the Black Sea region until 2035. This would create billions of new investment and thousands of new jobs. It will create a whole new industry, a high value-added industry, including manufacturing of equipment, development of port infrastructure, development of logistics companies, operation and maintenance facilities, all needing high-paid jobs. High-paid jobs that are desperately needed in places like Varna, in places like Constanța in Romania. In order to unlock this huge offshore wind potential, we need consistency and predictability. We need a regulatory framework, which Romania already has, and a pathway to achieving these targets. Otherwise, the huge investors that are developing projects in more mature markets in Northern Europe, in the Baltic Sea, and across the world, to be honest, are not going to come to the Black Sea. So we'll miss a window of opportunity. We'll also miss an opportunity to transform the way we do business in the Black Sea region. And we can benefit from the economies of scale of offshore wind. So, with no further ado, I would like to open this conference and give the floor to Delan Dobrev, who is the chairman of the Energy Committee of the Bulgarian Parliament, and one of the key policymakers that have been trying to open up the way to offshore wind in Bulgaria. Delan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Martin. Hi, everyone. I would like to first thank CSD for this conference, and Martin and his colleagues for the work they have been doing for the last more than 1 year, I believe, analyzing the opportunities of offshore wind in Bulgaria, preparing legislation, and supporting this topic in every way possible, even with almost violent clashes with the opposite side, financed most probably by geopolitical, other geopolitical forces. But anyway, if we get back to the point, it is crucial for Bulgaria to adopt offshore wind legislation as soon as possible, because we're missing opportunities. We expect a shortage of electricity in Bulgaria in January and February. The analysis of our system operator is that we would need between 500 megawatts and 1,500 megawatts of power in that period, January and February. The worst news is that according to the analysis of our system operator, the whole region would have a shortage of electricity that would be around 300 megawatts. So we need additional generation facilities as quickly as possible. You know that in Bulgaria we had one coal-fired power plant that closed this year, Contur Global. They had 4 units, each of them 220 megawatts. And the analysis of the owner, the majority owner of Contur Global, shows that they cannot work sustainably even if prices are higher than 280 leva for 3 or 4 months during the winter. Why 280 leva? Because that's what they have calculated to be their cost basis. They're paying almost 200 leva per CO2 emission quotas. They're paying for coal, they're paying for salaries, so their cost basis is 280 leva. And despite the fact that we have higher than 280 leva prices, during the summer and during the winter, these high prices hold for or happen just 3 or 4 months in a year, and this cannot cover the cost of operation. So they are firm in their decision that they're closing. They're even scrapping Unit 1 and 2 to open the way for another investments. Their concrete plans are to build a PV plant together with a battery, with storage, and they believe this is much more economical than trying to continue or making efforts to continue production of electricity using coal. So, in the region we have shortage of electricity, which is the bad news. Unfortunately, I cannot tell you good news. I cannot tell you that we're going to adopt that legislation in the next 3 months, because we have been struggling to elect chair of the National Assembly for a couple of weeks now. So we cannot do the very first task of every parliament, elect a chair. So we have a parliament, but we don't even have a chair. We don't have a chair, so we don't have commissions. We have 8 different parties in parliament, and it looks absolutely impossible to have a majority in that parliament. And it very much looks like we're going to have another election in a couple of months, spring next year, due to the political instability. And until we have a clear majority in parliament that can back offshore wind, this legislation cannot happen. At the same time, in Bulgaria, we need offshore wind for another reason. You know that we have a huge budget deficit, which is estimated to be close to 8% of GDP. The proposal of the financial ministry is to both increase social security, increase taxes, cut spending, cut infrastructure projects, and so on. And despite these heavy measures that we need to take, we would still have more than 3% budget deficit. And again, there is no majority in parliament that would back what is necessary. The reason that we need offshore wind is that this would be huge investment in Bulgaria, which will generate revenues. It will generate revenues for the government budget as well. Because when you have reached a point at which you have an 8% budget deficit, you need to have, you need to make brave moves in a way. You need to have big projects. You need to have, I believe that we cannot solve the current crisis, budget crisis, with increasing taxes, because this is not sustainable. When you increase taxes, when you increase social security payments, what you do is you slow down the economy. You don't stimulate the economy, you slow down the economy. So what we need is investments instead. You know that the economy can grow in 4 different ways. It can grow through consumption. We cannot do much about the consumption, because if we raise salaries artificially, as we did in the last couple of years, this is going to pump up inflation, and we want to be to become a member of the Eurozone. So this is not an option, and we don't have the money for that. You can grow through investments, private investments. Interest rates in Bulgaria are much lower than the interest rates in Europe and in the other parts of in the rest of the world. So we cannot stimulate private investments reducing interest rates, for example. The economy can grow through government spending, but we cannot secure more government spending because we're already minus 18 billion level, minus 8% already. And the economy can also grow through encouraging net export, but we cannot do anything about that because it's not up to us. We're a small open economy and we very much depend on what's happening in our trading partners, how their economies are developing and not ours. So how can we grow? We can grow through, in my opinion, only through foreign investments in large infrastructure projects in Bulgaria. If we have 10 large infrastructure projects, 2+ billion level or euro, this can actually solve the situation, the difficult situation. How can we do that? In my opinion, first we need, of course, again, we need majority in parliament, but we should select 10, for example, such large infrastructure projects. This includes offshore wind as one option, but also highways and different other infrastructure using the concession law for now. Using the new concession legislation, we should have an advisor like World Bank or European Investment Bank or any other large financial institution that would support us in drafting the terms for these concessions and after that collecting offers and evaluating them. So this should be very transparent, this should be very open, this should attract attention by the largest investment funds around the world. So yes, we need offshore wind for two reasons. One is that we don't have enough generating facilities, not only in Bulgaria but in the region. And second, because we need these very large investments in order to stimulate the economy, allow it to grow and receive revenues in the budget which are necessary to solve the budgetary problem. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you so much, Delan. And I just wanted to add that indeed investment in offshore wind is usually done by some of the largest pension funds in the world because they think these are projects and infrastructure development that can basically cover their liabilities to pension holders all across the world because these are stable investments with huge revenues over a very long-term period. If we want to compare what offshore wind represents, it is a kind of a new oil boom, but this time with low-carbon energy that would help basically reduce the consumption of fossil fuels and achieve all of EU's climate objectives by 2050. And we need all the gigawatts in all European seas to do that. Bulgaria and Croatia are the only two countries in the EU still without a special regulatory framework. So it's high time that we catch up. Thank you, and I hope we can work on this in the next months and year to make this happen. Now I have the pleasure to give the floor to Marius Köppen, who is an analyst at CSD, to moderate the next discussion. Marius, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Martin, and thank you, Mr. Dobrev, for setting the stage for this important discussion. Also, thank you all for coming today. My name is Marius Köppen. I work for CSD, and I'm joined today for this very important discussion on offshore wind by a panel of very experienced experts. First, all the way over there, we have Remina Alexieva from CSD. She's an analyst, just like me, in the Energy and Climate Program. Then we have Ms. Marta Stoianzanu from Romania. She is a policy officer at the Romanian Wind Energy Association, and she worked for the Romanian Ministry of Energy before that. Next we have Ms. Ana Milanovic-Rusan who has a background in environmental science with a focus on spatial and environmental planning. And she works and leads the work of the Renewables Grid Initiative on environmental impacts of offshore wind. Next we have Mr. Murat Nurak. He is the chairman of the Turkish Offshore Wind Energy Association and has many years of experience in working on offshore and wind energy projects. Last but not least, we have Mr. Bernd Ockels, who is the technical director for renewables at ERM, a specialist sustainability consultancy, and he has more than 25 years of experience in the energy sector. So welcome to you all. Let's start maybe with the Bulgarian context. So Remina, I'd like to ask you, what, in your opinion, are some of the most pressing bottlenecks that are preventing Bulgaria from becoming an important player in the region for developing the offshore wind sector?
Thank you, Marius, for the floor, and hello, everyone. Happy to be here. That's a very important question, and this is a question that we've been analyzing from different perspectives at CSD for more than 2 years now. And as Martin mentioned in the introduction, we do have now this number of 116 gigawatts of potential. So we know the potential is already there. We have the technical and economic analysis to back that up. And now the question is, how do we go from there, addressing the existing bottlenecks and challenges that are currently in place? There are many, as you know. Political instability is only one of them, and I wanted to outline 4 that we think are major and can actually be addressed with very concrete mechanisms. So the first one is actually having the regulation. We at CSD have been kind of contributing any way possible into thinking how we can create a special regulatory framework for offshore wind. And this is needed because we see that renewable energy legislation is not working. It's far from perfect. There are many procedures that are not currently in place or are not being handled efficiently enough. And applying that to offshore wind will be even a bigger challenge. So it makes perfect sense to have a framework that gives special and more stringent rules to offshore wind projects from the beginning, where the auctioning and the siting happens, to the decommissioning. So when what do we do with these wind turbines and the projects when they actually finish after 25 to 30 years. So that's the first and main thing we need to work on. The second thing is something that is a very important concern also to the general public and to experts, and this is addressing environmental coexistence and how do we address these risks with different animal species and nature. So I do hope my colleague Anna will obviously elaborate on that, but we think that this is also a key factor to address in the legislation. So having actually very transparent procedures and consultations that are related to environmental assessments, both strategic and also for each individual project that is being proposed. So first and foremost, we need that strategic assessment, and this is something that is currently lacking and is a very big challenge. Also, we need monitoring programs. This is a very good opportunity for collaboration between countries, because we need to kind of oversee what is happening with the environment as these procedures go along. Thirdly, we need the infrastructure. We currently, in our assessment, see that there is a number of challenges related to enabling this effective infrastructure to support the sector. So we need a high voltage transmission grid, we need upgraded facilities of the ports, and also this will be a great opportunity to actually develop the ports and relevant facilities to hubs. My colleagues and I, also with external experts, we were in Denmark a few months ago, and I had the opportunity to see actually a very developed port infrastructure that supports overall economic development of the region. So we have a very high tech solutions that are being made there, not just the assembling and the production of the facilities. So this is kind of a broader economic aspect in place for the infrastructure that is currently lacking. And the fourth, and maybe one of the most also important challenges that we have now, is the currently lagging and incomplete market liberalization. This is a problem that we at CSD have been addressing for a number of years now, and is something that is currently not creating the best investment environment so we can actually bring that foreign investors to develop the offshore wind sector. Prices are volatile, we have this instability, and we need to address this issue as soon as possible in order to allow these processes to happen effectively.
Thanks a lot. I think that was already a very elaborate answer. Just maybe you already mentioned some of the like regulatory, environmental and social risks associated with offshore wind. So how do you think Bulgaria could address these in the best way?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So, as I said, there are a number of risks. Something that we've been working on and we think is the first step is developing a robust framework that, as I already mentioned. So we need a very well written and backed up Renewable Energy in Maritime Spaces Act that actually encompasses the different procedures that we have as part of the process, environmental assessments, and is coherent with environmental legislation. But also it opens up market competition. So as part of our work, we've developed the concept of having two models in the legislation, so having a centralized approach where we would have Ministry of Energy and other relevant authorities actually do mapping of the sites and kind of guide this procedure when the auctioning happens so that potential investors can apply and can support that process with the relevant document preparations, assessments. But we do have also a decentralized model where we have an open door procedure where investors that see, you know, one day when the liberalization happens and we have more certainty in terms of the market prices and the investment environment, you would have investors that could basically apply, do all the assessments on their own and say we want to do this project here to the Ministry of Energy and with the other relevant authorities, and then this would kick off another set of procedures that would assess this proposal, basically. So we believe that having both of these procedures would be best to kind of address the current governmental deficiencies, but also stimulate this kind of investment drive. And just to maybe also summarize something that is really crucial and not addressed enough, we do need to integrate specific offshore wind targets and milestones in our updated National Energy and Climate Plan. This is something that we're very far behind. We have not yet submitted an updated version, and this is something that would set this strategic regulatory framework that would hopefully also bring light to the Renewable Energy Act in maritime spaces and will kick off and set the scene for actually unlocking the sector.
Thanks a lot, Remina, for this overview on the situation in Bulgaria. We also have a Romanian expert with us today. So Romania actually passed its offshore wind law this year. And the Romanian Wind Energy Association has been a very active player in the development of this regulatory framework. So I was wondering what, in your opinion, worked well in the development of this regulatory framework, and maybe what could have been improved in your opinion.
Good morning. Thank you for the question, Marius, and thank you for the invitation. It is a pleasure to be here. Indeed, the members of the Romanian Wind Energy Association are very interested in the offshore wind in general, and they consistently contributed to developing the regulatory framework in terms of the offshore wind. Up next, I would like to add some context by mentioning first that Romania has, based on World Bank assessment, a technical offshore wind potential of 76 gigawatts, where, thank you, 76 gigawatts, where 22 of them are for fixed foundations and the rest of 54 are for the floating technologies. Secondly, in Romanian economic exclusivity zone, the wind speeds are over 7.5 meters per second in shallow waters, so we say that this is a relatively good resource. Moreover, the first installations are expected to be done by the end of 2032, according to the National Energy and Climate Plan that has been updated in this year. Up to now, Romania managed to approve the Maritime Spatial Planning in November 2023, and this document, I think, may suffer some adjustments and supplements in order to transpose the Renewable Energy Directive, the third one. We also managed to approve the offshore law, as Marius already mentioned, in the Parliament on May 2024, and this is the primary legislation. Regarding the secondary legislation, the Ministry of Energy stated that they will start, I think they already looked how to do this, they will start to initiate a study to identify the offshore wind perimeters, based on which the procedure for exploration, construction and operation of the projects will be prepared, as agreed by the law. Most recently, 2 days ago, the Romanian Energy Regulatory Authority published for public consultation the draft order for proposal to be approved the rules concerning the connection to the grid of the offshore wind power plants. So this is the most recent update in terms of legislation, both primary and secondary. So now that we all know the context, I would say that the Ministry of Energy has been the main driver of setting up the primary legislation for offshore wind. In our case, the decision makers have been motivated to take responsibility and to move forward with such a complex process of bringing together all parties involved in this emerging market. Based on our experience in the association, sometimes, if not always, it's very difficult to align different needs and interests to the same goal. And as always, the Bulgarian, I think they are having difficulty in doing so. There is still a long way to go, but passing a law is quite an achievement for us, even if the bill is only setting the general framework, the responsibilities, a timeline, tender and concession agreements, some permitting consideration and support scheme, because the Ministry of Energy might, and I underline this might, offer aid for the development or operation of offshore wind farms on the condition that such projects are becoming operational in 8 years from the beginning of the signing of the concession agreement. I would say in the end that the success formula is government support, a committed Ministry of Resort, and the acceptance of asking for assistance. In our case, the European Commission and the World Bank Group supported the government of Romania to publish a roadmap to help realize the vast potential of offshore wind in Romania and the required steps to move further with this process. The roadmap is based on 2 potential scenarios. There is a low growth scenario that is targeting 3 gigawatts of capacity to be built by the end of 2032. And the second one, a high growth scenario that tackles 7 gigawatts that will be built by the end of 2032. I encourage you to read this document if you have time or, I don't know, the opportunity to do so. It's a very vast document, and it tackles all the steps that must be done in order to reach to the to having a pipeline of projects and to reach the operation phase for wind turbines in the Black Sea, let's say like this today. So these are my points, and if you have other questions, in the end we can address them.
Just maybe one follow-up question. So, like drawing from your personal experience, like, what do you think? Like, how can Romania attract investment and maybe also at the same time strengthen cross-border cooperation with its neighboring countries on offshore wind energy, like Bulgaria, for example?
Thank you again. So to attract investment, I think it's always difficult when you are a small country, but in our case, I think we have the good mix for the investors, but not maybe in terms of offshore wind. And as stated before, Romania has a good offshore wind potential, but it is not comparable to wind speeds in the North Sea, for example. So I think there are several better places for investors to go when we talk about available resources. So as such, Romania has to understand that offshore wind is a regional, European, and even an international game. Therefore, we must put on the table some compelling benefits for the investors to even look towards the Black Sea. Based on our experience with other governments that succeeded, for example, UK, Denmark, or Germany, it is key to provide a robust, transparent, and timely process for seabed leasing and for project permitting, together with investments in the grid, which for Romania, I think it's a must, and other infrastructure required to deliver a sustainable pipeline of projects. Finally, these governments that succeeded, they also understood that offering a stable and attractive route to the market for the energy that has been generated for the electricity, it's mandatory. And in the end, I think that for investors, it's about bearing the risk. If investors have to bear risks that are outside of their control, such as regulatory or policy, they will require an increased rate of return, so they will have to cover it. And when drawing the line, when they will look at the figures and at the overall situation, maybe they will decide not to invest and to allocate their capital to other international investment opportunities. So this is a risk that you have to assess from the start when working with the actors involved. And an interesting principle that I found in the World Bank roadmap is that the risk should be placed where it can be best managed. I think this is a smart statement to think about. And regarding the cross-border cooperation, Marius, because you also asked about it, it seems that the first step has already been taken by putting in place this coalition and by having discussions, by writing down joint statements, and by having these kind of events. So I think it's a good start. And one good argument, I think, that should be brought forward to the governments would be that according to the Renewable Energy Directive, the third one, by end of December 2025, each member state shall agree to establish a framework for cooperation on joint projects with one or more other member states for the production of renewable energy. And I think offshore wind can be one of them. So why not to proceed in this direction? Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Yeah, I think indeed you mentioned some very important points, and it is crucial to acknowledge, I think, that when it comes to offshore wind, cross-border cooperation in the Black Sea is key. Also, like my colleague Remina already mentioned, another important aspect to consider, of course, are the environmental impacts of offshore wind. So luckily we have an expert on this with us today, Anna from RGI. She also manages the Offshore Coalition for Energy and Nature in the North Baltic and Mediterranean Seas. So maybe, Anna, can you just briefly introduce the work of the coalition and also maybe talk a little bit about what are some of the potential environmental impacts of offshore wind?
Yes, thank you, Marius, and thank you for inviting me to this really important event. So as Marius introduced me, I'm Anna, and I work in Berlin, but we work on the European scale in this NGO called Renewables Grid Initiative, or RGI. And we have this really important and big coalition called Offshore Coalition for Energy and Nature, very conveniently acronymed OCEAN, where we have big offshore wind developers, environmental NGOs, and transmission grid operators from the North and Baltic Seas. And recently we also launched the Mediterranean Coalition. I don't think we will need the Black Sea Coalition because there is one already. So yes, the point of the coalition is actually to support the accelerated deployment, but the nature-friendly deployment of offshore wind and grid infrastructure. And here we work on different aspects. So we work on maritime spatial planning, auctioning criteria, mitigation measures, nature-inclusive design, nature restoration, all of the important different aspects that could influence if the infrastructure is actually contributing in a nature-friendly way to decarbonization of the system, but also to the much-needed nature restoration. Because as you probably know, it's not only the climate crisis that we also have biodiversity crisis, and they are very much interconnected. That being said, one of the biggest threats to biodiversity is actually climate change, which says that we have to really prioritize the decarbonization and the deployment of renewables. Therefore, we are trying to find the ways how to do it in the best possible way. And one of the work streams that we have is actually on the environmental risks. So even though we need the infrastructure for offshore wind, it's still infrastructure. Therefore, it has its impacts. This doesn't mean that there are no ways how to avoid them or minimize them. North and Baltic, particularly the North Sea, is already a mature market. There's already decades of experience on this, and there is no reason why not to learn from these experiences, particularly in the markets that still have no offshore wind farms there. This is actually a luxury in Bulgaria and Romania, or in the entire Black Sea, to learn from the mistakes and avoid them in the first place. So some of the most prominent environmental risks, they can actually happen throughout the life stage of an offshore wind farm. So from the construction, operation, all the way to decommissioning, there are some environmental risks. Maybe the most prominent one is the collision with the birds and bats. There's also the problem of light emissions, noise emissions, EMF, so electromagnetic field, vibrations, heat emissions, habitat loss, habitat disturbance, and it sounds quite a lot. But then when you go into the things that you can actually do, you find a lot of solutions. And this is what we actually did now. So together with the 35 members that we have in the coalition, including the wind developers, who have more than 20 years of experience in working in this kind of environments, we collected these solutions. And I'm going to mention it right now. Actually, I brought this report where we summarize these solutions. You can find them at the registration desks. There are a few, but we also have them on their website. So there was also some mentioning about the transparency and data, and this is what we actually want to foster. So we publish everything on our website, including more than 80 avoidance and minimization measures that offshore wind and grid developers can and are applying to avoid and minimize these environmental impacts. And in this way, you actually ensure that the future infrastructure and deployment is avoiding and minimizing these biodiversity impacts. The field is constantly improving, that's also true, but there are some no-brainer, low-hanging fruits that you can always do. And it all starts from the maritime spatial planning, obviously. Maritime spatial planning should cite the future offshore wind farms in a way that avoids, in the most prominent way, biodiversity impacts.
Can I just jump in just for a second? I think what Anna mentions is very key for the Bulgarian context, where there is a lot of disinformation, there is a lot of propaganda about the dangers associated with offshore wind, the risks associated with offshore wind. In many cases, they are highly exaggerated. So it's important to note that these risks exist, but there are mitigation strategies well developed in mature markets with a lot of experience, and there are measures within Bulgarian legislation to prevent these risks to materialize. Instead of blocking the process from the very get-go, it's better to cooperate with environmental NGOs, with activists on the ground, with the local communities that have the first-hand view of what's going on and what the risks are, including fishermen, work with them to minimize this risk instead of creating an artificial clash, you know, because everyone will benefit in the end from offshore wind.
Thanks, Martin. Maybe on that point, you know, when it comes to integrating environmental requirements into the regulatory framework, maybe Anna, you know, given your experience with this, what are some of the maybe best practices for integrating environmental requirements and risk mitigation measures into offshore wind policies in Europe?
So yes, being in the European Union, there is already quite a few European directives that you should all adhere to, obviously, like in the North and Baltic Seas, it's the same. The Birds Directive, Habitats Directive, Natura 2000, all of these sites, they have to be taken into account very early on. But this is just a European basis. Now, everything depends on the national context. And I'm sure that each state in the Black Sea has really strong research institutes, environmental NGOs, local communities that are very familiar with their environmental context that can support actually siting. So here we go into the first thing is the regulatory framework that was already mentioned quite a few times today, but there's also maritime spatial planning that really has to take into account the input from different stakeholders, including the environmental stakeholders and local communities. So maritime spatial planning, empowering stakeholder engagement and empowering environment is crucial. Then you also have the auctioning. So there is more and more talk about non-price criteria in auctioning. For instance, in the Netherlands, it's proving to be really interesting, where you don't necessarily give the permit to the richest developer, but you actually give the permit to the developer that takes into consideration the environmental context in the best possible way. Then if there are also guidance from the state or even surveys done by the state that provides the developer the most information on what they can find at the site, that gives them more incentive to then develop the best mitigation measures and nature-inclusive design. So it goes all the way from the top, but also from the local level. It's super important, not only from the environmental context, but also for social acceptance in general, to understand the concerns of local communities, to understand the perspectives of different sectors. And in this way, you can actually not develop only nature-friendly, but also people-friendly offshore wind.
Thanks a lot for these important points. I think these are indeed like a crucial consideration when it comes to developing the sector. We've already talked a little bit about regional cooperation, so far mainly between Romania and Bulgaria, but we also have Mr. Durak from the Turkish Offshore Wind Energy Coalition with us. So I'd like to ask you, you know, we see that Turkey is positioning itself as a pioneer in developing the offshore wind sector in the Black Sea. So maybe what kind of opportunities for collaboration and cooperation between Turkey, Bulgaria and Romania do you see?
Thank you, Marius, and great pleasure to be in nice snowy day in Sofia. And also I would like to thank the CST people. I mean, I should give the name Martin, Remina, and Marius inviting me here. Yes. Offshore wind is not a country-related issue, but it's a regional issue, cross-border issue. Already, Mr. Chairman Delion also mentioned. And, but what I would like to emphasize, first of all, that offshore wind is not only wind power plant, I mean, not only electricity producing unit, but those turbines is Navy. I mean, they have strategical importance. They are protecting our maritime borders. And they are also extending our maritime borders as well. So, and Turkey, Romania, Bulgaria, and you can name also in the later stage, hopefully, Ukraine, Georgia, and maybe, I don't know when, but maybe Russia as well. We are all BRICS countries. But as a regional, we have to work together for like maritime special planning, ports planning, vessels planning, maritime traffic planning, environmental planning, and maybe supply chain planning as well, because we are always talking about offshore wind, but there is no offshore wind port, both in Turkey, Romania, and Bulgaria. How come that we can realize this project without ports? And in addition, we don't have jackup vessel as well in those three countries for installing offshore wind turbines. And I know that also there's a shortage in Europe as well. There is no jackup vessel or offshore wind turbine installation vessel in US as well. So these countries, say the crescent, I mean, first of all, crescent, Turkey, Bulgaria, and Romania, can work together. We may have one vessel, for example. We may have one port. That port can assist all those projects together. We don't have to make separate ports, one in Romania, one in Bulgaria, or one in Turkey. When I say port, actually, it's an offshore wind generation and installation port, or they call marshalling port. The other ports, like operation and maintenance or planning port, it's easy. We can use many ports. I visited Varna port already, but in this our region, this port is missing. And when port is missing, that means supply chain is missing as well. I see also some Chinese friends here. It's nice that now Europeans are competing and fighting with Chinese supply chain. But instead of competing, maybe we should cooperate with Chinese supply chain as well. And for Mr. Chairman Dalyan just said that offshore wind is big investment, but actually it's not big, it's huge investment. For the time being, only 1 gigawatt offshore wind farm is feasible, say, because of scales of economy. So 1 gigawatt offshore wind farm is nearly 3 billion euro. So 3 billion euro is huge investment. And maybe countries come together to find the proper investment model as well. I don't think only one offshore wind energy law is enough for this. Turkey is very well established, by the way. We have specific offshore wind tariff. We have very well established onshore wind supply chain, onshore wind market, more than 12 gigawatt in operation and nearly 30 gigawatt license. So that means forthcoming 10 years, we may have like 50 gigawatt onshore wind. According to our national energy plan, 5 gigawatt till 2035. But I told the ministry is that, okay, 5 gigawatt is not enough for supply chain for one offshore wind port or vessel. Because these offshore wind port or vessel, jackup vessel, is also a big investment. But Turkey should think about surrounding countries. According to the ESMA World Bank, program, they say that, both this Ukraine, Turkey, Romania, and Bulgaria and Georgia, they have around 1,000 gigawatt installed capacity. So it's a quite high, say, potential, although nearly 80% is for floating solution, not fixed bottom issue. That's another maybe hurdle or obstacle that these floating solution or floating foundation should a little bit advance. And I'm offering that also kindly, politely. I'm representing Turkish Offshore Wind Energy Association, and I know that Martin and Marina Trafinova, she worked a lot for Black Sea Renewable Energy Coalition, but the name is better. Black Sea Offshore Wind Energy Coalition will be better. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll definitely take some notes on that. Maybe can you just, because you mentioned that, cross-border collaboration between Turkey, Romania, Bulgaria, that, there should be one port, countries should collaborate.
Maybe, yeah.
So what is, more specifically, maybe the role of Turkey that you see in this collaboration?
Well, Turkey is a country now. We are taking care of 10 million refugees, nearly population of Bulgaria, or double the population of Denmark, where Bernd coming, or nearly population of Austria or Netherlands. So Turkey did a great success story on onshore wind in the past. I mean, more than 12 gigawatt on operation, I told. And we have already 3 blade manufacturer in Turkey, 5 wind turbine tower manufacturer, and Siemens has also a nacelle manufacturing facility. So we did very good success story on onshore wind. But for offshore, we need shipyards, we need maritime sector as well. In Turkey, that's also very well established shipyard sector, maritime sector. What we are missing as a Turkey is the offshore wind port. Although I know that Minister of Energy and Minister of Transportation and my association working closely together to locate one offshore wind port in Turkey, in the Marmara Sea. So Turkey, as a 19 million people, 10 million refugees, not Turkish, can play a big role here. And we are the longest shore Black Sea country as well. We have nearly 120 gigawatt capacity, I mean installed power capacity, nearly half of them renewables. So we have scale also. For example, I was in Baku. They have a 5 million population and 8,000 gigawatt installed capacity. Too small. How many gigawatt you can put to Baku, to Azerbaijan? The scale is small, but Turkey is a huge. So, and we have a very well established also legislation for offshore wind, which can be also the example to Romania and Bulgaria. I read carefully Romanian Offshore Wind Energy Act, but by the way, I think there's a lot of missing point. So we can play a role, and Turkish systems, both for also supporting the supply chain, not only project, but supply chain also very important, and those turbines should be produced in this region. So Turkey can be an example. Thank you.
Thank you for this. I think, Turkey definitely has an important role to play in this. Luckily, we also have an industry representative today with us who can maybe, give us some insights into what the industry would like to see happening in the Black Sea for it to invest. Maybe, given ERM's experience in more advanced markets like Denmark, for example, what are maybe some of the most crucial lessons from your perspective that the Black Sea region could learn from or also maybe replicate?
Thank you for the question. So, I believe it has been mentioned a couple of times, but I will frame it a little bit different. You are entering a beauty contest. So the Black Sea region, you will be fighting investors. So they have a lot of opportunities. So it's important that you will be looking good. And one of the important things, it's starting an offshore wind adventure. It will challenge your authorities. And you have to earn the trust from the investors. So it's important how you communicate about it. When the way Delian, you introduced the offshore wind, it's important. It matters how the parliament, how the government, they talk about renewables and offshore wind. So and then I would say it's better to start small and successful and gain the trust and then upscale. I'm not saying that you should only have 1 or 2 small projects and then wait 10 years. It's obvious you cannot be that patient, but still try try not to be overrun by the development. So offshore wind simplified. It's if the wind resource it's okay. It's my experience from developing projects in mainly Denmark, UK, and Germany. So it is that if the wind resource is okay and the foundation cost is acceptable, then it's a good idea to build an offshore wind farm. But we are always facing some showstoppers. One of them it's price, it's permitting and grid connection. It has been the most frequent showstoppers we have met. So price uncertainties, it's my impression that you are going for a CFD scheme, so I'm not afraid of the price. Jumping to the grid connection, I had a check of your transmission grid, and oh, I would love to make a grid connection of an offshore wind farm here. In Bulgaria, you have 400 kV lines close to the landfalls.
Sorry to interrupt. Thank you so much for mentioning that, because if you hear what people talk in Bulgaria, they'll tell you we don't have any capacity in the grid. So it's good that this myth's debunked.
So I'm glad. So, but then the alignment of the authorities, it's important. So I can mention a couple of examples. One of them, one of my first projects from the offshore substation to the landfall was 65 kilometers. And to get the permitting, we had to interface with 3 authorities. And those 3 authorities, they were afraid of saying something that could create precedence and make the other authorities angry. So this internal alignment, it's crucial, because once you start, you want to progress your project. So perhaps it's not a showstopper, but also please consider, and it was also mentioned, the harbor capacity, the local content. You will have huge impact, and you can have a larger positive impact if you're prepared for offshore wind. And in general, local content and local supply chain, it's important. So back to the beauty context, content competition. Everything will be captured in the developer's risk register. And they will capitalize the unknown. And if I should mention one example, but it could work both ways. It's the quite high prices for balancing electricity in Bulgaria. It could have an impact. Some developers, they might say, okay, if we can be allowed to make direct line grid connection of a battery energy storage system, then we could actually see some potential upsides on it. So then we are back to the legislation of a grid connection. How is that made? And then the last, perhaps very important thing, it's do not underestimate the power of small and very angry stakeholders. It could both be stakeholders who are just against or not happy about wind turbines in general, but it could also be a very few local citizens. And they can be surprisingly well organized. And what we see is that those local networks, they start cooperating across borders. We saw a very successful local group in northern Germany. They contacted a similar group in Denmark and tried to guide them. And they are improving. They are getting better and better for every project. What we have seen, and as quite important, it is this new EU Net Zero Industry Act, where it's possible to fast track and get easier permitting or consent for the wind farms. It's quite important. So make sure to be aligned, start small and successful, and make sure that the Black Sea looks fantastic.
Thanks a lot for this, excuse me, for this advice. Maybe, like, in your opinion, like, what are some of the like channels, or maybe let's say, how can industry leaders signal to policymakers, for example, in the Black Sea region, the incentives and conditions needed for an effective regulatory and financial framework to unlock the potential of the Black Sea region?
Well, all right. First of all, I see it as a two-way dialogue. And I would not expect the industry leaders to be the first movers. What we have seen, if we go back 10 to 20 years, then the front runners, it was small local developers starting the projects, and then when it looked like it's going to be successful, then the industry leaders, they joined. But now the small developers, they are not only focusing on their own country. So what we are seeing now, it is that the small and medium-sized developers, they of course have projects in their own countries, neighboring countries, but they are perhaps also seeking something more exotic. So I've seen developers from the Nordics having projects in Morocco, India, Taiwan. So I would actually expect those companies to be the first movers here, and being the first companies trying to engage in dialogue with their authorities here, and then the industry leaders, they will follow. So again, it's back. It's the Bulgarian, or in general the Black Sea, the countries around the Black Sea. It's the policymakers, it's the government. They simply have to decide how do they want this offshore wind to develop, and then also send the signals to the market and simply be open for the market dialogue. We have seen it other places where of course I have more experience from Denmark, but we have seen here, we are running a 6 gigawatt tender right now. Even though you would expect the Danish market to be very mature, then the Danish authorities, they started very early with the market dialogue. And they have also decided that the way the grid connection, the grid code will be managed, it will be slightly adapted. So they are also engaging into market dialogue and information meetings about it. So similar, I believe that the first step and most important step, it will be from governments and the policymakers. And somehow such a dialogue, it also ensures that you have a transparency about what's going on.
You've also mentioned, or not just you, but I think several panelists have now mentioned also the importance of involving local stakeholders, the importance of the impacts on local communities. So I just wanted to ask this last question before we open the floor to the audience. So maybe now is the time to think of some questions that you would like to ask. But maybe on this topic, like what are maybe some of the impacts on local coastal communities that you've observed in advanced markets like Denmark, Germany, UK. And could you maybe give some examples also for, let's say, positive synergies with other industries?
Well, you have to split it into two phases. You have the construction phase, and in the construction phase you have a massive positive impact. So it's important, and normally in most countries where the wind is blowing, then people don't want to live there. And very often there is a lack of industry, and we have seen UK. It has been the large fishing ports going back. Grimsby is a quite good example, where they completely lost their local industry, and now they are building up on offshore wind. it has a huge impact, very positive impact, both in construction phase, but also afterwards, because you will have 25, perhaps 30 years of operation.
Yeah, thank you very much to all of you. So now I think is the time for the audience to ask some questions. So just, yes, please.
Good morning. Thank you so much to CSD that probably for the last 2 years this discussion is open in the country of Bulgaria, which is very important. I have
Could you please introduce yourself?
Sorry?
Could you please introduce?
Thank you. Sorry about that. Iulian Ivanov from the Collins Group. My 2 questions are, the first one it's going to Mr. Dilan Dobrev, having in mind his experience as a former Minister of Energy, former Chairman of the Energy Committee. This discussion, I believe, it's fruitful for future adoption of such legislation. I believe if this is not in this Parliament, probably in the next one. What do you need in order to proceed with such legislation? I think the experience from Turkey and Romania, from the Baltic region, and the CSD discussion and reports can be helpful for future legislation. But anyway, this audience, I believe, will support such legislation. Therefore, as a practical steps, what do you need for the next Energy Committee? And my second question is to Murat Durak. Would you tell us, please, following the current geopolitical situation, do you recognize some drop in the investment interest for offshore wind in the Black Sea, including Turkey? Thank you.
It's simple. I need 121 members of parliament.
Yeah.
Because our parliament is 240, so we need majority. My group is only 69. So 69 members of parliament are not enough to pass that piece of legislation, and the rest of the parliamentary groups, they're very uncertain on whether they want to support or not. Some of them are very much against. Those that are pro-Russian are a very strong opposition, and they are even organizing events in which, like the one event Martin Vladimirovich participated earlier this year, in which they are very vocal and they try to scare people off. So if your question is how the representatives in this call can help us by your expert opinion, interviews, and so on, so that people can see the actual facts and believe in the truth and not in whatever the pro-Russian propaganda is telling them.
But this is anyway mutual efforts. I understand your concerns from the political side, but on the other side, when there is a draft legislation put in the Energy Committee for discussion, on the both sides anyway should be a public discussion which can help in that way. But if we remove the public political fights, do you need special documents and special draft proposal in order to proceed as a discussion in the Parliament Committee?
No, I don't have any concerns. I know the legislation, it is already done. We have improved it significantly in the last 1 year, so we are ready to go. The only thing we need is a majority in Parliament that we don't have at this point.
Thank you.
I have a short answer. I am optimistic about the future. World needs Black Sea needs world. I have only a little bit concerns about relatively lower wind speeds, and that's why countries, if you work together for this MSB, grid planning, ports, vessels issue, those projects can be a little bit more feasible, viable. That's my concern only. But for the politically, I don't see any risk.
No problem with the current geopolitical situation?
No.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. I saw another question just over here.
Actually, a number of comments before the question, if you would allow me. Well, a few suggestions that I hope will contribute to the debate. I'm Gennady Kundarev. I'm with E3G, a climate policy think tank. And one of the findings in one of our recent reports on accelerating the sustainable finance and investment in Bulgaria is that we severely lack the buy-in of the middle class in the country. And what I didn't hear today is how we are going to make possible for regular people to turn also renewable energy projects, to open them for retail investors, for the everyday person, to turn those type of projects into their savings account, maybe in a well-hedged way, maybe with the help of some financial intermediaries, like Martin suggested, also pension funds as institutional investors. But I think it's extremely important that the everyday person has a stake in the energy transition, and that this is open and possible. And we know that this is possible, and there are good roadmaps with projects from Western Europe, where shareholders are allowed to have a stake at a wind energy project. Bulgaria has very much missed an opportunity to develop, for example, the prosumer bases like Poland did in the previous years. So we'll have an ever-shrinking space for projects that people can directly invest in, rooftop PV or whatever, because we may not need that much of capacity from this type of energy. But a wind energy project is not something that a person individually can invest in. We need to make possible that this type of projects are open. Then we get to the point that some of the benefits really need to stay with the local community. Where this is possible, we know that actually communities are not only stop opposing wind energy projects, but they actually want more developed in their territory or waters. And another thing that I see missing very much, when study tours, for example, get organized, we tend to invite mostly politicians and decision makers, but we need to also have communicators on board, because we know, for example, that in the UK, the fishermen that has been in opposition 20 years ago actually now have developed also their types of businesses or indirect ways to also benefit from those type of developments. And we need to show it also to the local people that oppose. And last, we need to distinguish between what is pure myths in the opposition, but we also have to proactively chase the pieces of, true concerns that are out there. And I give an example with the environmental community that I know well. I know there are people that spread around complete myths about wind energy, that, you have no life around the wind farms, which is a complete nonsense. But in the same time, we live in a country with a terrible track record when it comes to following up legislation. It doesn't matter that we'll have the legislation if we cannot enforce it. And this is something that we need to proactively speak to the people and find a way that in the framework, we would allow them to still have some control, monitoring, chance for true transparency, which should be in there in the legislation, and tackle those type of concerns, even if they're not voicing it out, because I've spoken to a lot of people. Last side note to Mr. Dobrev on the budget deficit. My back-of-the-napkin calculation shows that cohesion funds plus the RRF in Bulgaria is exactly about 7-8% of the GDP, which sort of closes the gap that we have. We don't accumulate those funds properly at the moment, and it will be a real tragedy if we just wait until the end of the programming periods and indeed spend this in 10 big infrastructure projects. We need to invest in people as well and open for the business and for the entrepreneurs in Bulgaria, those type of funds. So I really cross fingers for more political pragmatism, even in this parliament or the parliament that will come after the 8th round of elections, if such happen. So good luck with that.
Thank you for the comments. I would like to give the opportunity to the panelists to reply to those comments if you feel like it.
Sure. EU funds, they do not close the gap because they're on both sides of the balance. So you have 8% as EU funds, as income, as revenues, and on the other side you have expenses, right? So it has nothing to do with the budget deficit. Even if we use the whole amount, the 8%, 9% of GDP that we have, as you mentioned, in EU funds, we will still have 8% budget deficit because it is due to other factors. But I agree with the rest that you said, that we need to find a way to help people benefit financially from such projects. I'll give you an example. In the Underground Concession Act, we give back, the state gives back 50% of all the revenues to the municipalities in which the concession is. So we could think about something like that. Although it's not directly to the households, it is to the local community somehow.
Thank you. I also saw another question over there, so please.
Thank you very much, Thorsten Geisler, Atlantic Club. It has been mentioned that we live in a new geopolitical environment, and security concerns that did not play such a role years ago now play a big role. And they will have an impact on the discussion about the future of wind power. And to my surprise, and to the surprise of many, on November the 4th, the Swedish government cancelled 13 planned offshore wind power projects due to a potential Russian threat. The security concern is that wind farms could affect sensors and radars used by the military, make it difficult for the country to respond to any potential future attack from Russia. So this impact on the sensor makes it more difficult to detect missiles that are fired upon your country and reduces the chance of shooting them down on time. I know that this security concern is not shared by other Baltic Sea countries. I don't think it is shared by Poland, for example, or Denmark, or Estonia, Lithuania, or Germany, but it will play a role in the discussion. Maybe not so much in Bulgaria, where the threat perception is still very low, but in Romania, the threat perception has always been very high. Romanian newspapers have reported for years that the Russian military is planning and preparing an attack on the Romanian coast. So I do not know whether this argument is justified, but we will have to deal with it, and maybe you can help us.
Any comments from the panelists?
Well, about the Swedish projects, a couple of them are being cancelled. In Sweden, they call it an open door system. It's more a non-system for how to get permitting for the wind farms. And you see a lot of developers developing the same site. In some cases, we see 3 overlapping projects. And in one of the cases, they started planning their project in a NATO shooting range. So obviously, that one will be cancelled. My experience from the Danish project, it is our military, they can find a technical solution together with their suppliers, and we just had to pay. It's perhaps, as a project developer, a little bit unpleasant situation. They approach you and then they say, this is the cost. So, and they won't tell you what they are changing or updating, because that's a secret. But they believe they can manage.
Just a short comment. You know, of course, Russia wants to threaten countries around Europe and wants to create the impression that we are under siege. This is, mind game, But exactly because of that, we need to build offshore wind farms, and we need the NATO Navy, circling around them, to show that the NATO Navy is more powerful than the Russian Navy, and we have nothing to fear in the Black Sea region. This Black Sea is our sea. It's not a Russian lake, as they want to make it. And, let's be provocative. we are not happy to have offshore wind parks in the Black Sea, but we are happy to have a Russian refinery and a port terminal owned by the second largest Russian oil company on NATO front doors, you know. So is that more acceptable when it is harboring potentially security services from Russia, when it's potentially smuggling weapons to Syria and elsewhere? Is that more acceptable than building offshore wind parks? So we are at a kind of at a crossroad in our geopolitical choices. So we need to think smarter than to, you know, accept any kind of threat as a legitimate risk.
Yes, over there, please.
Hello, thank you very much for the fruitful discussion so far. My name is Maria Trifonova from Sofia University. I'm also representative of ETIP Wind, which is the European Technology and Innovation Platform on wind energy. So we see that the European wind energy industry is really flourishing, especially when it comes to offshore wind. In the wake of the 2022 energy crisis, Europe installed record-breaking 4.2 gigawatt of offshore wind capacity, and this year we are again on achieving another record. And there's over 30 years of experience of this industry in Europe, so we don't need to actually reinvent the wheel when so much can be learned and adapted from existing success stories and other EU member states. I've seen remarkable progress in Romania, Turkey, and Greece for the past 2 years. And it is very disappointing and discouraging to still talk about unlocking offshore wind potential in Bulgaria and to see this is still a discussion. Blaming a supposed lack of wind resources is simply an absurd. I see also representative of China here. So maybe more than the half of the Chinese 38 gigawatt of offshore wind capacity is installed in places with a comparable wind resources to the Black Sea. So this is between 7 and 8 meters a second. Pointing to environmental impacts as barrier is also not really well founded, I believe. Offshore wind has a significantly lower environmental footprint compared to nuclear, hydropower, and thermal power technologies. Bulgaria is not really lacking the expertise when it comes to knowledge and scientific knowledge and data. And if you just look on the work of the Bulgarian Academy of Science, there are 2 institutes, they have already a lot of data that could be useful for outlining exactly areas for deployment. The same is also with Varna's Naval Academy, which also possess a lot of softwares. Also in terms of naval or military topics. So there's also a lot of analytical capabilities and software instruments. So we see that offshore wind, looking at the data from other countries, offshore wind energy is affordable. It is actually green power that is urgently needed by industry, but by our industry. At very affordable price, and there is no other technology right now that we can develop that would bring us lower LCOE when we are talking about large-scale power generation. So the economic benefits also for the Bulgarian coastal regions are significant. CSD already published several reports on that. So we have also some estimation what, for instance, port modernization, but also all the additional jobs creation and all the economic benefits for other related industries could bring to Varna regions or the Burgas region. This would completely change the economic outlook of these regions and maybe also the dependencies of current economic interests. And maybe this is also the reason why they are so vocal players right now talking against offshore wind. But I believe what is the real issue, and looking at the, for instance, discussion in Romania about offshore wind, which is really very rational, and then you can focus maybe really on the local concerns. But in Bulgaria, it's not really possible because we see that there is well-paid, well-financed, targeted well-organized and also politically motivated disinformation campaigns in the entire country. And it's not only against offshore wind, it's against wind energy in general. And the protests in Varna, they were not organic, and we all know about that. And they were not based on just the concerns of the walkout, they were politically driven. So my question here would be, maybe to all of you, but maybe also to media representatives and Mr. Dobrev, how the institution can protect really the interests of the society in this sense, and how we all should cope with this disinformation campaign, which is really distracting, and it is discrediting also institutions like, for instance, Bulgarian Academy of Science or academic institutions, which come there with data and scientific knowledge, and this is always disregarded.
Thank you for the question. Mr. Dobrev, would you like to reply?
I would like to, but I'm not sure I have an answer. I'm not sure how to fight disinformation. This is something that we should all try to do. I don't think there is an institution, not only in Bulgaria, but in Europe, that's actually fighting disinformation or Russian propaganda, for example. If you have any ideas, I'm ready to hear them. Thanks.
Now, if I may, because CSD has a separate unit fighting disinformation across Europe. Thanks so much to Maria's comments, and I must say that Maria is probably in the core of the development of offshore wind in Bulgaria. It's one of the best experts in Europe probably on offshore wind, and she has nailed the problem. It's political will, so we need more political will to fight these entrenched informal networks of influence, which are very much related to business interests. But we got to understand, and I think, Mr. Dobrev, you mentioned that in your opening remarks, is that if we want to present alternative business opportunities to, even to these networks, if you want, you got to work to showcase and market offshore wind as an alternative economic development model. Everyone will win, including the corrupt, including the Russian influence networks will win from offshore wind. And they need to see that benefit in the end of the day, maybe. This is provocative, but in the end of the day, if we want to be inclusive, you know, and really do stakeholder engagement, which we're trying to do, maybe we need to sit down with the Russian influence networks. Of course, I'm joking, but it's really bottleneck that's artificial. There is nothing organic in this. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Martin. Looking at the time, I think we've run out of time. So I would like to bring this to a conclusion. I'd like to thank all of the panelists for joining us today. I think it was a very interesting conversation, and I think we addressed many topics on people's minds. So I'm glad that we could touch upon all of those, at least a little bit. And also thank you to the audience for your questions. So yeah, I think what's left to say is, again, thanks for coming, and feel free to stay a bit for some additional discussions.